So we're going to go back to the beginning and look at some of the course objectives and talk about where we are in relation to those. We're going to look at the publishing industry overall. We're not going to spend a lot of time on journals, and when we get to Project Muse, we'll focus on those. We're going to talk about university presses, largely because they don't have the same drivers to adapt to the new marketplace as commercial publishers. And in a lot of ways, this is where experimentation is going to occur, and a lot of new developments in the years ahead will happen. We'll also talk about some future models that are under consideration and what the future will look like. And so, sit back and enjoy the ride. Let's revisit the goals and expectations of the course. I really feel that we've learned the basic fundamentals of book and journal publishing together. I think you guys have demonstrated your knowledge on that point to me. You've evaluated and proposed a publishing project from concept through to publication. Many of those projects were the best projects I'd ever seen. And you had a really good understanding of what you were doing. You took pride and ownership in it. There was passion. There were really smart ideas and creative ideas. So I think Bullet 2 was covered. Analyze and understand the financial implications of book and journal publishing. I think you've done that as well. And just looking at your financial tables that you put together, there was a solid effort. And sometimes you didn't think the project was going to make money, but in other instances, students did, and I really applauded that confidence. That's something that you need in this business. Develop a marketing and sales plan for both books and journals. Now, I haven't looked at all of those, but I've been answering your questions, and I've seen a lot of creative ideas come out of what you're thinking about. And basically, I'm happy to entertain. There's one project that was crowdsourced, and others that you've done some investigations and looked at the parameters that I've put in there, and you've come up with your own, which I applaud. And that shows that you really are ready to make a difference in the profession. Describe the basic steps of the publishing process. In your projects and in your assignments, you've done that. You've done that very well. Grasp the current state of the publishing business as it migrates from a print-based model to a digital-first environment. And the one place that I was really heartened when I went there was when you talked about the value-added e-content for your projects. And there were lots of different, really interesting ideas there that shows that you grasp and really grasp what's happening in the industry. Effectively communicate publishing concepts and strategies from an expanded base of knowledge. I think that you'll sense that you can get a sense of where you stand on that from some of the comments that I've left on your assignments. I really think that some of the concepts, as I've mentioned, and the strategies were better than any that I've ever seen. So, and I've communicated that to Professor Grossblatt and to others that even the other instructors that you're going to have as things move on, that you are a very special cohort. So you need to take that under consideration as you move forward together. And when I was in graduate school, I'll share with you something, and I may have shared this before, but the other students are really going to make this program. And you need to get to know them and to work together with them, because collaboration is a very key component of what's happening in publishing today. We talked at the beginning about a publishing competency, and I feel very strongly that for you to succeed in this industry, you need to communicate, to present, to embrace change, to understand at least a little bit what the technology can provide, how to analyze a situation or a product, and reading not only literature or articles, but things about the profession. What do you read? How does content resonate with you? Because that's going to be a large factor in the content that you create. I've seen great communication skills in your assignments and projects. I haven't looked at your presentations yet, but based on what I've seen, I'm very encouraged by your ability to present. Embracing change, you've come up with lots of different creative ideas that reflect an understanding of what's going on in the business. And you also understand technology. You've shown me that. By proposing products, by commenting on proposals, I think, and are developing that competency in how to analyze a situation or a product. And just based on the discussions that I've monitored, you all do read and are very alive and vibrant in the profession. You're getting a sense of the kinds of projects you want to propose and the content that you're creating. So yes, there's a lot of noise in the industry these days. You'll see in the upper right there, The War of the Words. That's a recent article in Vanity Fair from the author's perspective about Amazon and the war with Hachette and some of the things that are happening there. And I also mentioned that we'll talk about university presses over the summer. These articles appeared about presses being under fire, and it's really the same article that's appeared for several years. Many of them lose money. How do they reinvent? What is the opportunity there? Um, Talking about journals and at the bottom there, less prestigious journals publishing a greater share of high impact papers. And that, really speaks to where the journal publishing industry is, that there's still a lot of research that's out there to be published, and there are still new journals being proposed. The libraries don't necessarily have the funds to subscribe to them. And also self-publishing, what's happening there? It's something you hear a lot about, and there's an article that I read recently about just how much how much revenues are being generated by the self-publishing industry, and that's not an easy amount of money or a line to discover on their P&L. And the publisher's ebook pricing hikes amount to price gouging. So what's happening is, especially within library settings, public library settings, and university library settings, publishers feel like they're not getting appropriately compensated for what they perceive to be high use of that content. So they're raising those ebook prices that go out and are even establishing a library price that's much, much higher than the list price. So still a lot of noise out there, a lot of consolidation, a lot of disruption. And when I look at that, I think about what are the opportunities? What's out there for you as publishers, for me as a publisher to take advantage of. So we're going to look at some numbers. I'm going to update some of the numbers that I've provided over the course of the year. I've recently provided you guys with the book stats report, and I wanted to just provide the latest 2013 State of the Industry report on what the finances look like. So here's a look at our $27 billion industry, and it's pretty much stayed at $27 billion since 2009. And you often hear the saying, flat is the new normal. The good news is you're not losing money. The bad news is you're not really growing revenues, but it could be a lot worse. So it's holding steady. The industry is maintaining a certain level and has hit a steady state. So you've got a lot of fluctuations going on in terms of format, but overall that $27 billion figure is pretty much stable and normal. On the journal side for Project Muse, we see that as well. Our growth, which used to be in the 7 to 10% range, is now down to about 3 to 4%, and that's really kind of growth by price increase, which it just shows you that the market is penetrated and that it's very difficult to grow revenues. Flat is the new normal really holds true when you look at the different segments of trade and K through 12, higher ed, and professional and scholarly, which is where we're focused heavily in this course. And you look at the trade, what happened in 2012? Well, you had the Hunger Games and you had 50 Shades of Grey. So, and that's still maintained in 2013. Probably Game of Thrones and those kinds of things, continue to help out. Basically, it's been kind of flat across the board for professional and scholarly. You get 3.74 billion down to 3.57, and then now back up to 3.62. So a little bit of fluctuation, but essentially within the range of where it's been. And it's good to look at the segments, I think, and to get a sense of, trade publishing is still the big driver of revenues here, and everyone's looking for what that next Hunger Games or 50 Shades of Grey is going to be. The report also examines what's been happening on the digital side over the last 3 years. And when you look at ebooks, and prior to 2011, you saw this meteoric rise in sales and revenues for ebooks. Though it wasn't revenues, these revenues did not replace the print sales for any publisher, and they grew as a percentage. So for the typical university press, it started at 3%, grew to 5%, 10%, and is now upwards of 20% of sales. But since you still have to do print books, and format doesn't really give you a lot of savings, you're still expending a lot of resources on both sides. And you look at internet products and services, digital course materials, and audio downloads as well. Everything still remains, fairly flat. But you see, in from 2012 to 2013 is really the first time that ebooks have flattened out. They went from 2.45 billion to 3.41, from 11 to 12, and now have kind of hit their level. And there are many reasons for this. Book sales in general are flat, and maybe there's a market saturation point for the users that they're still we've reached a plateau, it looks like, and we'll see what happens in the years ahead. It's not, ebooks are still in their infancy, and the reading experience isn't great. There are things I love about my Kindle, and reading a book, a continuous PDF of a book is not easy or pleasurable. Reading a gigantic, page after page of HTML is also not pleasurable. So I still think there's work to be done for the reading experience and what happens there. And I think that might have something to do with it. But again, here are the figures on the digital side over the last 3 years. I also think when you're looking at consumer behavior that this has kind of impacted, behaviors have impacted book sales and print book sales over the last decade. And you start thinking about where you get your information on a daily basis. And I no longer read the newspaper. I go to certain places to, the Washington Post is a trusted repository of content, the Baltimore Sun, the New York Times. But there are also, for just this quick kind of update on what's been going on, I'll click on the Facebook homepage and see what's coming across there. And people are absorbing more and more smaller chunks of information every day. There's a constant assault of information. You're no longer reading a book for any extended period. I think a lot of this noise has helped fragment our attention spans. You could be reading a book on a Kindle, watching a TV series on your iPad, and monitoring Twitter feeds on your phone. Doing all these things at once. I, work on a technology platform, and a lot of the folks I work with operate this way. They have many things going at once. Some even doing all these things while raising a family. And it's really hard to get anyone's sustained attention these days. And if things can be found for free and it's good enough, then that's fine. There have been a lot of businesses that have been built on good enough is okay. Just go to Elsevier's website or Wiley's website or even Springer's website. You'll see lots of content that's very expensive, and nobody's claiming that it's the greatest content in the world. Nobody makes that claim. It's just there. There's a critical mass of it, and that's it. But when you think about consumer behavior and your own consumer behavior, think about how you do things, and has that had an impact on, your ability to buy books and read books? I think my smartphone actually has contributed to a lot of my own personal downturn in reading, and it does concern me. I have a pile of books on the side of my bed, and I don't get to them as often as I should. So I think that there's something here. When you think about the previous slide and the sales flattening out, that I think there's something in it in terms of just the avalanche of information at our fingertips today, which wasn't there before. Books used to be the thing that people would go to. Now there's so many other options. When you look at sales performance by channel, one thing that struck me on this slide was the online retail market. You see right there that those skyscraper bars going up, and the rise of Amazon online retail, increasing from 3.72 billion in 2010 to 7.54 billion in 2013. It'll be interesting to see. It looks like that too is flattening out, and it's reaching kind of a market saturation point. But right next to it, you have brick and mortar, and you look at those stores at their height in 2010, dropping down to 7.12 million in 2013. Also, institutional sales, and you're looking at libraries and library budgets decreasing, and having zero being a good year when your budget increased by zero, that going from 6 billion to 4.6 billion. Um, Here's the story. The channels really tell the story of how things have changed and the volatility. The wholesalers have maintained a pretty steady, throw off at around 5 billion. The direct to consumer, not a huge decrease there. Um, Book clubs and fairs still staying around the same. A slight uptick in export sales, but this is a very useful chart to show you just how the sales mix is working and what's happening in the different channels. How many times have we been in a Barnes and Noble or another bookstore, and we're looking at the books and thinking to ourselves, well, I am usually in a must-have mentality, but there's times when I think, I wonder what this costs on Amazon. And at one point I remember looking at something and having the store clerk say to me, you're probably just going to go buy it on Amazon. And whenever I can, I'll buy the book at a bookstore, because I think that there's nothing that replaces that experience of browsing and sitting down and looking in a book and talking to the person at the information desk about the book. Or somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, I read that book. That's a great book." I tend to go to the same Barnes and Noble. It's at the Johns Hopkins University, and there are clerks there that I know. They carried my book, and I like to support the bookstores. But this whole concept of showrooming, which drives sales, just having the books there out. You're able to pick them up, to touch them, to experience what the poet Paul Muldoon calls the quidditas, or the thingness of a thing, has led to sales and leads to people buying books. It's kind of similar to the pass along effect of a book. If you've got a good one, you pass it along. But I think by being in the showroom and touching the products and engaging with them, those lead to sales in the store and outside the store. So, that's I think one of the interesting concepts that came out of that BISG report, showrooming. So it's not all about numbers. In most situations that you will be working in publishing, you're going to have the drivers of margin and mission influencing a lot of the decision making that goes on. And on the mission side, you talk about the widespread dissemination of knowledge, the advancing of the field, tenure, sustainability, cost recovery. Most not for profit organizations have a very strong mission component. You're servicing researchers and authors and editors. You're providing services. You're trying to enhance the visibility of the content. And you're publishing things that may not have a really strong revenue case to support them, but that are incredibly important, and the publication has to happen because of that. On the other side, you've got a much more straightforward profit and loss motivation for publishing things. And that's to maximize profits, to achieve sales targets, to drive net margins, to generate surpluses. This is mostly your commercial publishers, their shareholders, and board of directors that have to be answered to. There's often even a stock price that's influenced by a lot of what happens. And as an organization, you've got to, and with your own publishing companies, you've got to achieve a balance here. And a lot of the publishing companies that you guys have founded have very strong mission-driven components. And there are many worthy startups that I've seen in this class that really have a strong mission component to help the world, to help make a better world. And you've got to have the funds to do that, though. So the further you go on the mission side, it's probably going to require that you take into consideration some margin concerns as well, in terms of how are you going to find the financial resources to do the things that you want to do. Um, and do those great things that you guys talked about. But this tension exists in every company, and you'll often find it at play when you discuss whether a project is viable or not. And I love this graphic because it really kind of says, it visualizes the state of play in the industry today. A lot of things aren't going to happen on the commercial side because they're just not going to make a lot of money. There's going to be some great creative endeavors going on the mission-driven side, because there will be funds to experiment and to try and change the model. So, mission and margin, that's something we all need to embrace and to learn about. This is really an excellent example of mission and margin at work. And we developed this at the American Chemical Society in the sales and marketing department as part of a strategy session. And we met off site and talked about all the things that we did and all the stakeholders that we interacted with. And we came up with this graphic, which really is focused on journals publishing, but really illustrates that tension that goes on between mission and margin. And essentially, what we're trying to do was open the gateways of access at the top to bring researchers in and introduce them to the electronic versions of the journals. And on the left side of the cycle, you've really got the margin driven concerns of pricing and sales and access and functionality. And there was a question for a long time of how much functionality could you add and what types of functionality could you add to then raise the price. And we never really got to that. We always just added functionality and didn't raise the prices because we knew that library budgets were constrained. So again, right there, that's a mission component. We're a society, we're a professional society, and we were focused on providing value to the members, but also to the institutions. And we really wanted folks to come in contact with a lot of the indicators of quality. So we made sure that we put forth all of the latest science citation index and impact factors and citations every year. Those impact factors, when they came out, we always told that story because that was a great story. And when researchers globally came in contact with that information, they'd always known in print that we had a strong brand, but they then really began submitting through our electronic submission stuff. And on the right side of that cycle, which we also call the infinite cycle of excellence because it continuously goes and we don't see it ever stopping, are those that editor community, that contributor community where you wanted to continue to get the best papers. And that in and of itself is a mission driven activity because that feeds into quality and that feeds into the values, the core values of the society. So we put a lot of investment into the editor author community, and holding parties, saying thank you, doing a lot of those things, building new electronic submission systems to ease the ability to submit. enhancing the review process, enhancing and getting papers published faster. That was something that we really focused on. So this graphic really shows that margin and mission at work together to try to continue to drive ultimately what sits at the center of this chart, which is usage. And that on the margin side enabled the subscriptions to stay in those libraries, because if this content wasn't getting used, they weren't gonna pay for it. And we never raised our prices or never had prices that were even in the ballpark of the commercial publishers, even though we felt like we had higher quality publications, and the PhD chemists that even worked on our publications in our production departments, that wasn't the same in those settings in those commercial companies. We always kept the prices reasonable, and the increases reasonable, so that we didn't impact upon that side. And at the end of the day, we were a society, and we really did have to weigh heavily onto the mission side. So welcome to University Press Week. This week is University Press Week, and I'm going to talk a little bit about university presses right now, because for me they are still existing somewhere in the 1990s. They haven't quite entered the 21st century of publishing. They're trying, and there are a lot of experiments going on, but they're still a little bit behind when it comes to some of the things that are happening, which makes them exciting. And I'm just going to take you through. I work within a university press. We are a digital component of it. We're also a little bit outside of it, since we deal with about 200 publishers at Project Muse. But I want to take you through some of that stuff and introduce you to some inside observations that I've had over the years about university presses. First of all, university presses are a great place to teach publishing, because a lot of the things that traditional publishers do are still in play. A lot of the things that digital publishers do are beginning to emerge. They publish all types of books: trade, monographs, course titles, professional and scientific works, and journals. They're increasingly adopting an integrated library press approach, meaning they're within universities. And are there synergies between what the library is doing on campus and what the presses are doing? And for a long time, they've remained isolated from that, and are now moving closer to their libraries. About 20 libraries across the country have university presses reporting into them, and I think that's actually a good thing. They must embrace change, just like everybody else. It's not going to be a time to ostrich your way through this. You're going to have to get out from your get out from underground and look at the new world, because if you don't, you won't survive. I mean, it's pretty clear cut. They, working with the universities, have an opportunity to be part of the solution. When you think of everything that happens within a university, why can't universities band together with all of their resources and help scholars publish their works? And they're great laboratories for experimentation. There's not that quarterly margin-driven pressure going on within university presses. Come visit Project Muse sometime. This is an open invitation for you to do that, and you'll see what I'm talking about. There are 133 university presses in the American Association of University Presses, about $615 million in sales. Many presses do not break even and require financial assistance from their universities. Many libraries at universities are becoming publishers. Large presses like Oxford, Cambridge, Chicago, Princeton, and Yale operate like large commercial publishing houses. Their prices are, their books are expensive, especially Oxford and Cambridge. They publish high quality stuff. They're very much standalones. They operate a little bit outside of the community as well. For instance, on the journal side, Oxford University Press's journal prices are much higher than the average price per title that's on of the journals on Project Muse. Now, we do have Oxford titles on our platform, and Oxford and Cambridge spend a lot of time going down the list of the smaller publishers on our platform to try and acquire these journals. And when they do, what happens along with any commercial publisher that acquires journals on Project Muse, is that the price goes up. So it's not really good for the community. These prices go very high, and libraries have to find the money to continue the subscription. So there it is. They operate like commercial publishing houses. We see new positions emerging within universities. The university librarian is press director. We saw that at Michigan earlier in the year. The transition to digital is slow, and it's happening, but it's not happening at a great rate. And there's not a lot of evidence that ebooks are really gonna be the savior for presses. It's still a product in its infancy, and I liken it back to when I got involved in journal publishing and scientific journal publishing in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s, and then in 1995 it all took off, and we began that journey. And I think we're just beginning the journey for university presses, which is why it really does excite me, and I think it's ripe and fertile ground for improvement and innovation. And hopefully, at one point, someday, I hope to have a direct impact on changing presses, and I'm working towards that in my own career. For a long time in book publishing, and it's still today difficult to really get at the metrics that are going on, behind the scenes. Who are your readers? Where are these books being sold? Who's buying them? Things like market intelligence is just not easy to come by. When you have wholesalers and distributors as in the middle of the mix, it's hard to really get at what's happening to your content. The increasing dominance of Amazon is eating into the margins. Um, Ebooks in libraries and in academic libraries, that's still evolving. These are all factors affecting university presses. Course adoption sales are going down because even you as students aren't going out and saying, "Hey, why don't I, give me the book that's the most expensive one." You're looking for used books and things like that. Um, Marketing departments are really slow to embrace web-based marketing, and I notice that there's even not a lot of calls of action in these catalogs that university presses send out. Maybe there's a phone number to call and place an order, but there's not a tremendous sense of urgency around the content. Um, the academy still remains a print-centric culture in terms of tenure in the humanities is still based on that monograph, that printed monograph. And there's a lot of discussions around that right now. Um, you know, why can't it be digital? Things like that. But it's a very complex issue. Um, the university libraries want to ensure the survival of UPs, but they're also concerned that this content doesn't have any resonance, that it's not being used. And one of the good things about our ebooks is that they are being used within libraries, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. And publishers, many folks that work within university presses come from publishing backgrounds, and there's not a great understanding of how libraries work. And a lot of the times they think about ebooks as being free to the world once it gets into a library, which again is just not an informed perspective. So, there's a lot of challenges and opportunities um, facing university presses, and change is going to come. So you see Dr. Evil at the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, and he's there, and I'll talk about him in a second. Um, but presses, they tend to isolate from the parent university. I mean, I once had a press director tell me that if I don't hear from the provost, then I'm doing a good job. And really, it's not like you want to go looking for attention, but it seems to me that there's a missed opportunity there in terms of aligning your press with the goals of the university. The content itself, humanities and social science content, is not must have like scientific, technical, and medical content. Um, you know, you've got an environment within libraries for ebooks where on the journal side they bought collections and feel like they've been burned. And for ebooks, there are many different things they can buy. They can buy the single user model, they can buy a multiple user model. Um, STL stands for short-term loan, and one of the book distributors called Yankee Book Peddler, which offers really kind of collectivizes a couple of the big vendors like ProQuest and eBrary, uh, have introduced short-term loan programs through these other vendors, and what's happened is I think that that's had an impact on the sales for university presses and course books, especially if you're only using it for a short time and it's not at a price point that can the press can recover the costs that it's that it's expended, then it's not good for presses. And I think there are a number of factors, but the library channel is just not robust, and to allow the libraries to be able to pick and choose and really get the right prescription of ebook content that they need, um, is going to allow them to not purchase as much content. Readers are pursuing all access points to find content, whether it's used books, is the ebook there? Can it be used? Are the professors assigning books that are in ebook collections? That readers are banding together and really, um, you know, trying to save money and not trying to buy that print copy of the book. And we're in a time when it's just in time versus just in case. And I hear that again and again from many of the big research librarians in the U.S. that, there used to be a time when it was just in case, when the budgets warranted that you could get everything or have the biggest collection just for that one patron that comes in that wants this book. And that's not where we are today. It's just in time. And this whole idea of, we won't be fooled again. There's which is kind of interesting, when you think about it, because you've got this idea um, that journal collections have really taken a lot of the money away from humanities and monograph purchasing, and that's true. But to really hold back, and I think some of these programs have allowed, ebook programs have allowed libraries to buy much less university press content, even if they weren't, in a kind of just in case mode. So won't get fooled again, where it should be directed at these, these large commercial publishers for their price gouging tendencies. I think it's having the reverse effect. And marketing remains antiquated. There's just not a lot of urgency being created. There's not a lot of smart marketing going on, in my mind, that when I look across the landscape. And there are some presses that are doing things like um, having Google Analytics on their shopping carts, and generating campaigns, e-blasts from there. And I think that's something that all presses should do. And here's that monograph situation I was just mentioning. So the purchase of monographs since 1996 from the ARL Libraries, which is the Association of Research Libraries, really the largest 120 or so libraries in the country. You look at serial expenditures up 402%. Those are journal prices. And then you look at monograph expenditures. And, it's in the recent years kind of on a up to 2011 on somewhat a little bit of an upward um, you, you know rise. It's not but you can see the big discrepancy there between what's being spent on STM titles and journals and monographs. And within publishing houses, it's very hard because you're bringing a monograph to an editorial board meeting and proposing it, and while it feels like your standard meat and potatoes monograph, you're looking at sales of 100 to 150 at a pretty high price point to make your profit and loss statement work. And hopefully you have some other properties and projects that will cover that, because it's just, if you're heavily weighted as a monograph publisher, I just don't see how you're going to be able to survive, because libraries are buying less and less of that content. And we're trying to make the case on the other side, Project Muse, that a lot of these titles, even backlist and archival titles, are being used, and that's kind of what we're seeing. This is something I came across as we switch gears over to marketing during my days working with Barrett Kohler publishers and doing co-publications with them, is that they actually give to their authors a Bill of Rights and Responsibilities, and one of those is for the authors to commit to at least one marketing campaign, and they must agree to be active and visible. And I think that's really great that this, and I think they've used that very successfully. It's just a great community builder. It allows you to get closer to your authors, and I think that it kind of sets the tone and the stage for what's going to come next. You look up there and you see mission-driven things like citizenship and communication and professionalism and quality, and even the word scholarship. Be accurate in all facts and accounts in your publication. But really, I'm focused on that advocacy marketing campaign. Numbers 8 and 10 on the responsibility side, and I think that I will show you how that related to my own experience in publishing. But I think that it's incredibly important that authors be engaged with their presses to really get the content out into their networks. So we'll talk for a minute about some of the things that I've done for my book. And as soon as it published, I started blogging. It published a week before the Ravens 2013 season. It published in August of 2013. So I started posting every week, a couple times a week, about the games, and I would post that. The blog Never Easy, Never Pretty. Created that in WordPress, and then would link it to a Facebook page for Never Easy, Never Pretty, and would just start going. And I would boost the posts there to 3 to 10,000 Facebook folks, and started to see some pretty interesting results. During the period when I first started doing that was sort of late September, and there were 1,000 copies sold from October through December. I received direct sales requests from Facebook. I boosted posts to friends of friends and to Facebook sites with certain keywords, and it's now up to 1,600 likes, and I'm still doing it. I think I'm going to do it through the end of this season. But really, the book's main the book was about the 2012 Super Bowl season, so it really had a somewhat of a short shelf life, and about a 6 to maybe a 4 month shelf life. Right before the holidays, it was a holiday book, and the press, Temple University Press, was pretty happy with it, and so as long as they're happy, I'm happy. But I really got out there and tried to drive sales through engaging readers with content. One of the reasons, of course, as to why I did that was because I was teaching this class, and one of my students really kind of dared me to publish a book, and I did. I thought, it would be a great experience to be able to take that knowledge back. So what you're looking at here is a chart from pretty much the publication of the book through to April of 2014, and you look up there at the top, there were 202 copies sold during the week of December 16th, I think through the 21st. So, I would look at this every, book scan. You can get that in Amazon, and you could see how many books you sell during the week, and it's a very useful site for the author to check things out. And you look down at 8/24, first blog post that week, 40 copies were sold. 9/17, 91 copies were sold, and then you start really driving things. And I want to show you what happened on December 16th. So for those of you who don't know, my book is about the Baltimore Ravens Super Bowl season in 2012, and during the 2013 season, they went out to Detroit to play the Detroit Lions. And on December 15th, which I believe was the day before, it was a Monday night football game, so this was, I think, the Sunday before the game, I do a post, 10 reasons why the Ravens will beat the Lions. And it garnered 248 views. It was the largest post, amount of people looking at the post. And at the end, I predict of this post that Justin Tucker, the field goal kicker, will win the game. And what happened was just that. Justin Tucker kicked a 61-yard field goal with time running out, and the Ravens won. And so the 10 reasons, that prediction came true. Um, After they beat the Ravens, beat the Lions on the 16th, another very popular Ravens website um, inverted my title or changed my title to Never Pretty, Never Easy, and um, calling it the Ravens Way, which is really interesting. They just changed it around a little bit, and this happened on December 17th. But sometimes you just get lucky, and things happened, and that week was became the highest week of sales ever, with 202 copies. And it also went to the second highest ranking ever on Amazon at 21,000. And it was the number one bestseller for something called Best Baltimore, Maryland Travel Books. I don't know how Never Easy, Never Pretty became a travel book, but um, it's fine with me. And it also had 90, something like, I don't know, a lot of Facebook shares. And that's another kind of metric to look at, is what kind of resonance, where is it going, how's it being distributed. And um, this was a lot of fun for me to do. I was very passionate about it, and I wanted to see, what, if anything, that I could do to help the publishers and help university press publishers. And that's really on the mission side of it was um, one of the reasons, the major reasons I did the book. I wanted to help university presses. There wasn't going to be at the end of the day any big payout for me. In fact, when you do a book like this, you end up spending more of your own money, which is what happened with me. And it's just a labor of love. I love sports, and I love writing about sports, and it was a dream come true. And I felt like the folks that made that happen for me deserved my best as a marketing person. So I went out there and really tried to generate and maximize as much sales as I could. And I think at the end of the day, the publisher was happy. So and I'll always have this experience to share with you. Here's another example of marketing that I engaged in at the American Society for Training and Development, which is now the Association for Talent Development. And we had a lot of fun, my staff and I, figuring out what books were going to on the weekly e-blast. And during its heyday, the weekly e-blast, or the weekly book report as we called it, could garner somewhere between 50 and 100,000 in sales if you had the right mix, because we had a very captive audience of 40,000 folks engaged in training, corporate training around the world, and we had a books commerce site that could deliver the PDFs, that could deliver the print books, that really was a very dynamic application, and we would spend a lot of time thinking about what was going to go on those e-blasts, because um, that was, it was during 2008, 2009, when the economy was still in collapse, and we were having, people weren't spending money on memberships, and the first thing that gets cut in any organization is what? It's the training budget. So we had this tool that we would use, and finding the right mix was essential, because if you focused on things like leadership development, talent management, training the trainer, we could really drive a lot of sales through those books. And when we didn't have books that directly addressed that, we would create derivative publications. We would take chapters from different books and put them together and sell them as a package under ASTD's leadership development, or talent management content, package that we would just come up with. We would synthesize and develop, and then bring the mix together. And it was a great experience, because we had everybody together in the room, everybody giving their ideas. And when you collaborate, publishing is all about collaboration. And these were the editors that were together doing this. It wasn't just simply your marketing folks. It was everybody together figuring out what that right mix was going to be. And we knew it right away when we would get it right, because you'd have $10,000 to $15,000 come through in a day and a half. And that was just a very, I think, liberating and unifying experience for everybody to see the power of um, digital marketing, and to be, everybody vied for the space on the association's homepage because that was the one place where every member went. We don't know where they went after that, but we were sure to know that they would go to the homepage. And one story there, my boss said to me, start a Twitter site. So we started a Twitter site, and within a half an hour, we had 400 followers. And that just shows you just how engaged people were in looking for content on the web and looking for free content. We put out a lot of free content too. We would put free samples of some of these packages that we were creating out there just to get folks engaged around the society. Yeah. So this is one of your calls to action is to look at the ways that you can thrive within this in kind of environment. And I see university presses and libraries as change agents and centers for innovation. Presses must work closely with libraries and have direct access to researchers, technologies, and the readers of the future. They must return to their original charter as service arms to demonstrate their value. And they constantly must add value to their university community and to their library. And I think presses and libraries together can transform the ecosystem as it stands. I think there's a bright future for university presses, and I think they can play a role in open access publications and really working together with groups of universities to bring the best content and high quality content to the scholarly publishing community. Now we'll move over and talk about what I do for a living every day, and that's Project Muse at Johns Hopkins University Press. Project Muse is an aggregation that started in 1995 and came about as a conversation between the press and the library, and it houses journal and book content together side by side from 200 publishers, digital content, and it's accessible in 80 countries and 2,600 institutions around the world. And we'll talk about the role that Project Muse plays in the future of publishing. Now we'll talk a little bit about Project Muse. I want to give you some top line highlights. Project Muse started in 1995, so in a couple of months we'll be celebrating our 20th anniversary. And right now we have generated annually about 26 to 28 million in revenues. 70 to 80% of those revenues go back to journal and book publishers. And that's really tremendous thing for us to be doing because we've kept many of these publishers alive. We've allowed them to publish both books and journals with these monies. One of the things that we have to look at, though, is ultimately we're not getting enough back at the end of the day to improve our own technology. So that's something that's very much top of mind for us. And on the ebook side, we constantly hear, since we sell both books and journals in collections, on the ebook side we hear from publishers that they're not getting a high enough price per title. And the way the model is constructed is that once there's significant revenue market penetration and the volume of revenues grows, that should balance itself out. But a lot of libraries don't really like buying ebook collections because they feel like they were burned by the journals publishing and journal collections from the commercial publishers, where a lot of their monies are tied up and they can't get out of those relationships. So and really that's how Project Muse began in 1995. We, the press director at Hopkins and a librarian at Hopkins got together and we're noticing this crisis in serials publishing where the prices were increasing every year, and libraries weren't going to be able to afford humanities and social sciences content, certainly not journals content. But on the other side of that, how would publishers be able to even put their journals online? They wouldn't have the resources or funds to do that. So Project Muse stepped in through a grant from the Mellon Foundation and from Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York, and we were able to construct a model that allowed for publishers to put their content on our platform. And it's been a great story, but we really need to focus now on innovation and a lot of the things that are going on, and really addressing what the future of that our platform is going to be. And I've included the URL, so go ahead and check out what we have there. You'll find some really eclectic content that you won't find anywhere else. So we've had some interesting things occur with journal usage over the last 5 years on Project Muse. When we changed our platform to include ebooks at the beginning of 2012, Google just decided to stop crawling us. And Google, like Amazon, can be very capricious in what they do, and Google really affects the journal side, but they stopped crawling our content and our usage immediately dropped. And this was only about 6 months worth of time, but about 80% of our referral traffic or more comes from Google. So in 2013, we rebounded up to 11 million downloads, and we'll project to hit 12 million downloads in this year. But it was really a struggle to get back up online, and over time, Google has just become a major source of referring traffic for us. So it's something that we have to watch. Our publishers are paid on downloads, so again, not any one publisher decreased proportionally any worse than any other. They still maintained their share of usage, just that usage went down significantly, and it caused a lot of consternation. And Google does this because what they do is they monitor your platform, and when you change something, they decide that whatever infractions that you've had over the years, they've given you the pass. But once you change a platform, that's when they really decide to stop the crawling and get you to do the things that they want you to do. And one of those things was they wanted us to provide abstracts for the poetry, or at least a first page of the poetry. So if you look up poetry on our platform, you can actually get poems for free because they're not behind the firewall. And you can't really do an abstract for a poem that really isn't the poem, especially for short poems. So anyway, interesting problem, and only something that grows out of Project Muse. This is something we call our global map of world domination, and it shows what's happening with our journals, which are now accessed in 81 countries. And this is something we keep around just to get a sense of what our global reach is. We're very proud of that. You look at in Africa and see the developing countries that we're working with. That's something also. About 400 institutions out of the 2,600 institutions are in developing countries, and this strikes right to our mission component. Moving over to ebooks, this has also been a really good story. We launched ebooks in January of 2012, and we're approaching 1.5 million chapter downloads. We've exceeded 13 million in revenues, and 9 million of those dollars have gone to publishers. We have 980 institutions accessing books as compared to the 2,600 accessing journals. There are 28 countries accessing content, and we've are working to develop some new models. We have a single title model where libraries can just order that one title if they'd like it. It's at a much higher price than if they were buying collections, and also working on something called evidence-based DDA. DDA stands for demand-driven acquisition, which is something that libraries are doing so that they don't have to really make those upfront purchases that we talked about before, that they can just select what's being used. And our flavor of that's going to be evidence-based, where we develop a threshold based on their usage. And looking back at the top, 80% of what are now 30,000 titles have been downloaded, which goes against the notion that this content isn't valuable, which was one of the things that in print, librarians, said that they never really used these books, and that most of them never got taken off the shelf. Well, when you make them discoverable, you see that story changes. So this is also something that we felt we had to do to make ourselves more viable and increase our value proposition to have ebooks. Here's a look at ebook usage for Project Muse, and you see in the first year we had about 200,000 chapter downloads, and we're projecting this year to exceed 1.1 million chapter downloads, which shows you how this content is taking off. Many of the larger universities like Yale and Harvard and Ohio State, who've purchased all of our books, are seeing tremendous usage and tremendous value. Um, down to like $1.50 to $2 a chapter download, which is phenomenal, really, when you think about it. And it's just a product that's still in its infancy. We're going to continue to see this usage increase, and we did some things like creating MARC records that allowed for um, you know libraries to really ingest that information into their cataloging services to make the books more discoverable, and they're actually requiring us to do that, and we were happy to do it. So it's really important to track what's happening on the platform for us, and to see what books are being, and journals, articles, and chapters are being used the most. And when you look at books here, Conversations with Tim Gautreaux. Tim Gautreaux is a Southern fiction writer, and there was a symposium last year that took place, and we're thinking that a lot of those downloads came from that symposium. But you also see Asian studies really as a popular subject on Project Muse. You see the book Reducing Gun Violence in America that the Hopkins Press published in 3 weeks in response to Sandy Hook, again going back to that mission component. Some other topical things like the social media reader. On the other side, you see those big institutions that have access to all of the content, and we really don't see a lot of usage from schools that have just bought a couple of subject collections. This is not quite the global map of world domination that you saw on the journal side, but we are making inroads, and we've got some developing countries there that are accessing books, and that's very exciting for us. Making some inroads into Asia and Australia and Western Europe, which is understandable. Even Brazil and some other countries in Latin America have taken us up, and South America have taken us up on the ebook, so we're continuing to push there. And we have, like we said, we have two models. We have the collection model, and lots of libraries are reluctant to make that commitment up front for collections based on what happened with journals. And the ebooks also, the single titles are kind of coming, more and more online. But those books are much higher priced, and we're competing with 5 other vendors that are doing that. So it's understandable that hasn't taken off quite as quickly. This is really a great story. The University of Virginia Press. The press director there, Mark Saunders, took bets on what everyone thought the most downloaded book would be on the Project Muse ebooks, and they got around, and they have these books on Thomas Jefferson, and you see at the bottom there's a Thomas Jefferson book, but everyone said that would be the most downloaded. But really, what happened was a book on eco-critical theory was the most downloaded book, and they were considering canceling that list of books because it wasn't performing from a revenue standpoint. But now they've changed their thinking, and they're able to now track with our usage stats down to the institutions that are actually using that book. And they can see where centers of excellence exist for eco-critical theory, and that may help in acquisitions or in sales. So this is really kind of a new behavior for university presses to undertake, is to really drill down and be able to see where their content is being accessed. I mentioned before something else that we look at from the metric standpoint are top refers to our content, and you look at start at the top, right up there at the top of the circle with Facebook. That's grown from nothing to about 1% of all refers, and just gives you a sense of that that channel in terms of what it does to drive usage. It's I think fairly impressive. We have about 25,000 Facebook fans, which grew from about 10,000 to 15,000 since 2012. And then you just look at Google and the influence of Google. If you don't have Google optimized on your site, it could have a tremendous effect. I mean, I think this shows here, almost close to 90% of all traffic is coming from Google. So we've got to make sure that those refers every month are still coming, still coming in. So now we're going to focus on future trends and models. These are the last few slides of the semester, and again, congratulations on finishing this course with the excellence and determination and hard work that you put into it. I am very impressed with your efforts, and we'll just take you through these last slides, and hopefully you can take something away from this presentation that you can put into action. That's what this class has been about, using the case studies and some of the techniques and tools that you've seen to put them into action. The one thing all publishers, and especially university presses, should be aware of is that disruption, disaggregation, discovery, and denial are all contributing drivers to change. You've got Web 3.0, mobile devices, iTunes, file sharing, all of this disruption, social book, the idea that hubs of authority, comments in a box, the engagement of readers around content, the disaggregation of content, articles, chapters, objects, data sets, snippets, abstracts, and you have the discoverability of those things all around driving usage. You have unlimited, the desire for unlimited access and sharing and proliferation, and you have a big sort of group of in the ecosystem that's denying this. You've got publishers that are in protectionist mode. You've got attorneys filing lawsuits about fair use. It's very much a lot of forces banging together to try and find some sort of happy medium here. But this is going to continue, and some things are going to shake out. Many firms, including university presses, aren't going to survive unless they embrace a lot of these things. And I think it's a great opportunity to really take part in something new, to be part of what this next thing is going to look like. And I think it's good to jump in and try and experiment and see where that leads. Can't forget about open access. It's here to stay. Internet equals free. Information yearns to be free. This was what really kind of started this way back, I think, in the 90s. That whole idea that if it's on the internet, there's a certain value attached to it, and it's not a high level of value, and the idea that it should be free. I get the fact that universities are funding research and then paying again to access it. This is an issue. I'm totally there. I think the author pays model is a somewhat sustainable model. I don't think authors in certain disciplines have the grant money to be able to fund their article into the open. I think that maybe things need to be done at a higher level to ensure that the humanities is preserved and that there's some funds available for that. It's become a global movement that is changing the perception of publishers. The UK is continuing to mandate open access, and this will have a significant impact on the humanities and social sciences. There's no you need to embrace it. You need to. Associations too are looking at this and saying, well, we want to provide content free to our members. That's part of our mission is dissemination. We want to advance the knowledge of the field, and very much, I talk to lots of association people whose boards are very much pushing for the content aspect of it to be made free. Don't we have enough resources and funds? Isn't this something that will be a game changer for our membership and bind them to us for a long period of time? So open access, I think, is something to watch. And once again, there are opportunities there to embrace for any innovative publisher. This is one comment that has stuck with me over the course of the last year. I'm an author. Agents don't want my books. Publishers don't want my books. The Authors Guild doesn't want me because the publishers don't want me. Amazon welcomed me as an independent author, and $62,000 in sales indicate the customers want my books. I made $1.95 on each sale at $2.99. That's $120,000 in my pocket, 64,000 in Amazon's pocket, and 0 in the pockets of agents, publishers, and bookstores. You don't want me in your ecosystem. I have joined another. And this has got me intrigued to the point where I think I might like to try to go through this channel with my next book, just as an experiment and just to learn. It was taken from the comments section of an article about copyright, and it stuck with me as something that I think the future, we're going to see more of this. We're going to see books going right into the e-readers. We're not going to have print copies for certain types of books, and I really believe that this is coming. And I think that it's a very liberating feeling to be able to do something like this. Of course, you need to be concerned about quality. You need to make sure that what you're doing and what you publish is of a certain level of quality, because the market will speak if it isn't, and you got to be careful there. But technology is moving along to the point where these publishing companies are no longer publishing companies. They're no longer they're more technology companies. They're having to invest in technology and to improve their products from a technological perspective, and this is costing them money. So when you see something like this, it really makes you pause and think about what that future could be. As you move on from here into the GW program and begin taking other classes, I wanted to leave you with some words of wisdom from Peter Brantley. It will take an entirely different model of publishing to succeed, one that recognizes that costs of literary production are plummeting, distribution occurs on the network, and that entry points into storytelling are growing increasingly diverse. And Peter Brantley is an very prominent industry consultant. He formerly worked for the Internet Archive, and you can find his work around, and it's on Publishers Weekly. And he's also on the Project Muse Advisory Board. So I guess my parting comments to you would be to embrace change, embrace the possibility, be open and willing to take part in what is going to be a very exciting future for publishing, and don't be afraid to be a leader in that realm, to step forward and to put your products forward and to make your case known. We need you, and all of the instructors in the program are very impressed with the work that you've done, and we enjoy teaching in this program because of you. I'll also share that, make friends and connections with your fellow students as you're doing. When I was in graduate school at the Columbia University, the one thing I took away from my creative writing experience there was the other students. Some of the great writers of our generation: Jeffrey Eugenides, Tama Janowitz, Rick Moody, Campbell McGrath, Victoria Riddell, many folks, William Rohrbach, Vince Pizarro, a lot of those great people that are contributing to what's going to be remembered for a long time were in my classes. And it's the students that make it. So get to know one another, and most of all, have fun. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for doing the work this semester. It was a joy, absolute joy, to be your instructor. And I'll talk soon. Take care. So now we're going to talk a little bit about future trends, and we're going to start with innovation. And what this refers to are the ideas that you have, the project ideas that you have that you're going to take forward with your own companies or in your positions that you currently are in. Whatever you do, try and back it up with metrics. Try to look at things like usage and alt metrics, and how many times has something been accessed or used or placed on Facebook. How many people are traveling to these places on your website. Innovation needs to be driven by data, and we have data now, data that we've never had before, and that ought to give you some inkling as to where you want to go. And I can't stress that enough, is that when you're putting projects together and you're doing your P&Ls, many of you did that in your research. You've got to have data to support what it is you're doing. And it's going to be more and more required. Gut instinct is also important. That idea when that Malcolm Gladwell talks about. Thin slicing, you've got to be able to thin slice in this business, but data, there's nothing better than data to inform a decision. Also, when you're building your projects and you're putting together your teams and you're leading those teams, it's great to have project management in your skill set. I would highly encourage there to be some project management aspects of how you do things, because it's I remember back in the late 90s when the project management movement started in publishing, and I was a little skeptical, but a project that can be managed by a project manager will go so much better than anything else. And I will just tell you that we launched an ebook platform in 9 months because we had one of the best project managers in the business, a guy named Marcus Seiler, to help us through that. Would never have happened without him. Content creation, when you're thinking about your products, think about them being born digital. Think digital first. Have a digital first mindset. What's it going to look like on the web? How are you going to? We had that section that said value add for your digital components, and I think a digital first mindset is going to get you far in the business. Also, on the marketing side, some of the best marketing teams are the ones that come up with products. Your sales and marketing department, if they're doing their job, they should be the ones pushing for certain types of products because they're talking to the customers about what they need. So, harvesting digital networks, what that means is to find where the conversations are that are going on around your content. You saw what I did with my blog and Facebook, and that's what that means. Harvesting digital networks, finding those communities around the content that are going to be the place where that content is going to resonate and then flow out from there. So these are some future trends, some things to think about as you move forward. Again, thank you for being an incredibly engaging and hardworking class. I appreciate your efforts and look forward to meeting you in person. Contact me anytime with any advice that you need, career advice, whatever it is. You want to give me feedback about the class. I thoroughly have enjoyed this experience over the last 12 weeks and wish you the best of luck. Take care.